first of all, thanks for doing this. We appreciate it.
A pleasure.
Let's talk first of all about Sears being a family tradition with the Brennans. Tell me how the whole thing began.
Well, actually, my grandfather started with Sears in 1898. He was one of a family of four children, and the other two people were school teachers, and one was a postman. And my grandfather went to work for Sears, and he had a big family. He had 8 kids, and 6 of the 8 kids ended up going to work for Sears, including my father. So we've had a direct connection with Sears from 1898 until almost the end of the century.
Why was Sears such a good place to work in those days? Why did it attract him and your father and the uncles?
Good question. First of all, it was a growth company. Secondly, it was a stable company. It offered wonderful benefits to its employees, including profit sharing, which was instituted in 1916. It was the first major company in the country to share a part of the profits with the employees. And so people tended to come to work for Sears, and they stayed with Sears for their entire career, as I did. I spent 39 years with Sears, and my father worked his whole career with Sears. Unfortunately, he died quite young, but he spent his career, and I had several uncles who also had their whole careers with Sears, including one that was with Sears when I was heading the company.
Sears, in the days when your grandfather started with the company, sold just about everything you could think of, from stoves and clothes and everything, all the way up to houses. I mean, Carlinville, Illinois is full of Sears houses.
Sears houses, right. Well, the idea was that Sears was the place you could buy anything. And in effect, in those days, we were a rural economy. In fact, we were just in the catalog business up until 1925. And what we did, what Richard Sears and Julius Rosenwald did, is brought to the smaller towns in America the ability to buy a wide assortment of merchandise at very competitive prices.
Yeah, and you're right. This was a rural economy. You couldn't go to the store and buy all the stuff. You didn't have the critical mass to get all that down here.
Right.
What drew you into the company?
Well, I was attracted to retail as a very young man. I started with a company called Benson Rickson. They were in the clothing business here in Chicago. And I started with them when I was in high school, and coincidentally, they opened a store, or bought a store, in Milwaukee. I went to Marquette to college, so I worked for them for 4 years while I was going to college. And then when I graduated, they offered me a job as a full-time assistant buyer, which for a guy 21 years old was a pretty good opportunity. But in the back of my head, I thought I wanted to be in retailing, and I wanted to be with the best. And so on a whim one day, I gave them a call and went over and had an interview and was hired. And it was hired as a salesman in Madison, Wisconsin, selling men's furnishings.
Now, what year was that?
That was 1956.
1956. Retailing in America had undergone some dramatic changes at that point.
Mm-hmm.
We saw, housing patterns, everything changed right after the war with the interstate highways.
Right.
How did retailing change, start mushrooming in those days?
Well, there were basically a few national firms, Montgomery Ward, J.C. Penney, Sears, Roebuck and Company. There was a chain of department stores that still exists today called Federated. And there was a move from the city, from the core city, into the suburbs. And as a result of that, shopping centers were built. And Sears was a pioneer in the shopping center business. We actually were in the shopping center business. And so what we were simply looking for is following the growth patterns of the demographics of the time. And there was an opportunity to build a huge number of stores. And so in those days, through the 50s, 60s, 70s, there was a huge expansion of retailing, and all of us participated in it. And as part of that, the shopping center developed, and the specialty store concept with the big box stores, so to speak, ended up being the core of a mall, a regional shopping center.
Now, for a young man on his way up, you started working your way up the positions in management, managing stores, and then chains of stores or districts.
Exactly.
That's how you move believe your first assignment was in the South. Was that correct?
No, my first assignment was in Baltimore. I went to Baltimore to be a store manager. I ran 2 different stores in Baltimore. Then I went to New York, to Buffalo, to Philadelphia, to Boston, to Atlanta, and I finally ended up back in Chicago.
Okay. And obviously the company thought that that you had something going for you, and you were moving up the ladder. You were in Chicago. What year was that?
Well, when I left Chicago in 1967, I went out to be a store manager in Baltimore, and I ended up coming back to Chicago in 1980 as president of the company. So a certain amount of luck, took place, and a willingness to move and to do different things. And unfortunately, I had a family that was willing. I had 6 children and a wonderful wife who were willing to follow me from town to town, and we ended up back home.
Now, that was 1980.
1980, I came back as president. Right.
As president. The company was diversifying. It was doing a lot of different things. And a lot of other companies were doing that. You saw insurance companies buying into media properties and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
That was the 80s. How would you describe that decade for your company?
Well, my predecessor, Ed Telling, who was a brilliant guy, had a vision of expanding into financial services. And he did it. We bought Coldwell Banker, Dean Witter. We had Allstate. Allstate was a wholly owned subsidiary of Sears that we started from scratch back in the 30s. And we had a big credit card business. So we were very deep in financial services. But essentially what happened is Ed Telling gave me the merchandise company to run. And while I was running the merchandise company, he went off and did this expansion.
When did you become CEO?
I became CEO in 1985. I was running the merchandise company up until that point. Before I became CEO, I was made COO of the entire company. So for about a year and a half, I ran the businesses, reporting to Ed Telling, but I was kind of running the things on a day in and day out basis. In '85, I became the president, chairman, and CEO.
And how did it come about that a number of years later, I'm sure as business trends shifted and the market forces shifted, you decided to refocus the company back to its roots, back into retailing?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Tell us about that.
Right. The essential issue was that we were successful in diversifying. I mean, great companies, Coldwell Banker, Dean Witter, Allstate. The problem was that we had a single stock, and the investor didn't want to buy a retail stock in order to get a financial services company. And so our stock was terribly undervalued. We never really got credit for the value that we had created. And so after a lot of reflection and a lot of work with outside help, investment bankers, for example, we decided to break up the company. And we took Allstate public. We took 20% of it public in an IPO. We took Dean Witter public, 20% in an IPO. And then subsequently, over a 3-year period, we spun the balance of Dean Witter and Allstate to the Sears shareholder. And we created an enormous amount of value. And here in 2005, if you look back, the market cap of the total company, that is the price of the stock times the number of shares outstanding, was about $10 billion. Today, Allstate alone is $40 billion. Morgan Stanley, which we subsequently merged with, Dean Witter merged with Morgan Stanley, has a market cap of $60 billion. And Sears has a market cap of $25 or $30 billion. So if you look at the value created, we went from about $10 billion to arguably about $100 billion in value. So the companies were solid. They've done incredibly well. It's just that the way the investor looked at where we were, they didn't understand what they were buying.
And ultimately, it all proved successful.
It turned out okay. Yeah.
Turned out very okay.
Yeah.
You also, in going back and looking at some of the literature and remembering the marketing as it changed over the decades when you were in control, you always had an eye out for modernizing the company, making it appeal to contemporary tastes. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, basically, I'm a retailer under all of this. I've done a lot of things. I've been involved in a lot of things. I still am. But basically, I started out selling merchandise, and I was a store manager. I love being a store manager. Running a big Sears store is one of the great satisfaction jobs that you could possibly imagine. And so I love the detail of the store. And we launched a program in the early 80s called the Store of the Future. It was an attempt to take, what arguably was a company that maybe had grown a little bit stale, and to look at each piece of the company, each piece of the store, because all the company was 1,000 of the single stores that are the essence of the business, and so we had a lot of fun doing that. We took 3 stores in 3 parts of the country, in Texas, in Boston, and here in Chicago, and we took a third of the store and we worked on bringing it up to date, and then ultimately put together a single store, and over a period of years we remodeled all of our stores to conform to the Store of the Future.
When you would look into the craftsman line, the tools area, the section there, it was all the logos looked right. Everything was
colors were matched. There was a commonality that said to the customer, "You've come to the right place. This is where you can get what you want in this particular business, whether it be appliances, whether it be hardware, whether it be lawn and garden, whether it be apparel."
You also went out and drew some star power in some of the lines, like Cheryl Teagues came and worked as a spokesperson for the company.
Yeah, Cheryl Teagues, Arnold Palmer. Arnold was a terrific spokesperson for Sears. He still is a terrific spokesperson for golf and for the country. One of the most wonderful people I've ever worked with. But we had a whole group of people that were supporting us that way.
And let's see. Reflect, if you will, on going from working as someone behind the counter, at the local Sears store, becoming a manager of a store, and then around the districts, and then on up. How did working behind the counter help you in the positions you eventually had with the company?
Well, basically, what merchandising is selling merchandise to people. And you have to know people, and you have to have worked. I believe you have to have worked face to face with people, and hopefully I've never changed. I mean, I'm still basically the guy I was in 1956 when I was selling long underwear to people, to the farm community in Madison, Wisconsin, and it's just kind of part of my makeup. So I was just fortunate to be able to move from job to job, from level to level. And in those days, I was considered to be quite a young guy for the jobs that I had. So I almost always had people working for me who were considerably older than I was, and it worked out. I'm blessed, I think, to have had the privilege of doing all those different jobs.
You joked a little earlier with your executive assistant about having had 2 or 3 or 4 retirements so far.
Right.
When you retired from Sears at the top, you must have been very proud of what you accomplished there.
I've always been proud of that. Because of my family heritage, because my family has been part of Sears almost from the beginning. It's a love that I've had that's hard to duplicate. But you go on to other things. And I have been fortunate to be able to do a lot of other things. I'm on 6 large corporate boards today, public company boards, which is very unusual. It's probably too many today, and hopefully my next retirement will be paring back a little bit of what I'm doing.
I want to move on to one of those areas. Executive chairman of AMR, worked with American Airlines through some very difficult times.
Yes.
Let's talk about that. How did you come to be with them?
Well, I was on the American board for about 15 years, and it's a great company. There's a great similarity with American and Sears. I mean, you're dealing with the American public, and you're dealing with customers. the family approach within American. People are proud of the company. The employees represent the company very well. Tough industry. 9/11 happened. The industry was decimated, and we had to make huge adjustments. Then, about 2.5 years ago, when the costs were so high and the business wasn't so good and oil prices were beginning to go up, we had to go to our employee groups and ask for some concessions. They gave us those concessions, but in the course of all of that, we kind of fell into a crisis kind of situation. So I was asked to be executive chairman, and we appointed Gerard Arpey as our CEO, and he and I worked as a team over the course of about 1.5 years to try to stabilize the company. We were about that far from bankruptcy, not a secret. Everybody in the industry knew that, and that's a scary thing to go through. And so when you go through a scary time, you need stability, and I guess I was kind of part of that stabilization. I'm extremely proud of what's happened. We just finished the second quarter. We made money in the second quarter, first time since 2000. That we've had a profitable quarter. The company is stable. We have a strong cash position, and the planes are full today.
And it's a huge impact on the state of Illinois in particular. When you look at, you go out here to O'Hare and you see the American presence there. What does that mean to the state of Illinois to have that company up and healthy, finally turning a profit?
I think it's incredibly important. Our base is in Dallas-Fort Worth. That the company is headquartered in DFW. The second biggest market is Chicago, and we are a very big player here. There are 2 airlines, of course, that are the major servers of O'Hare, and O'Hare is a gateway to the world, and the world is what the future is. I mean, we're looking ahead today at commerce between Asia and Europe and South America and the Middle East. Unbelievable. And the link with all of that is the airline business. We're going to launch airline service nonstop Chicago-Shanghai in the spring. And we're going to in the late fall institute service to Delhi, nonstop service Chicago-Delhi. And so O'Hare is a linchpin in the world economy, and we're a very important part of it.
And I know that you were active in the expansion of O'Hare and all of the work that went on in that.
We've been working on it for 15 years, and I think it's going to take place. I would say it is going to take place. In fact, just this week there was a vote of support for the O'Hare expansion plan. We desperately need a couple of more runways at O'Hare. The problem is not the airport itself. The problem is when weather moves in. And when weather moves in, you have to stretch out the number of flights that are taking off and landing. And when that happens, there's delays that take place all over the world.
Well, I know it backs up everywhere when that happens. I need to also turn to some of your work in the civic arena as well. I know that your long affiliation with Marquette continues to thrive, and of course DePaul University. Let's talk about those 2 institutions first.
Well, I went on the board of each of them. It's very unusual to go on the board of 2 major universities that are only 100 miles apart. I ended up as chairman of the board of Marquette, did that for 4 years, and then subsequent to that, when my term ended, I was asked to be chairman of the board of DePaul. So I have chaired 2 major universities, and I've had great satisfaction from that. It's a whole different world in some ways. In other respects, it's the same. But you don't make decisions in quite the same manner in a not-for-profit world as you do. In a corporate world, you make the decision and bang, you do it. There's a little more reflection that takes place in the other world. I've also, for the last 7 years, I'm in my 7th year as chairman of the board of Rush Presbyterian St. Luke's Medical Center. And we were in a kind of a turnaround situation there that has happened, and we're very pleased with that.
Well, You mentioned that the healthcare industry and everything that's happened with that in the last 20 years, the growth of Medicaid spending, everything, its relative impacts on things. Not easy running a healthcare organization in this kind of environment, especially one that serves such a diverse population here.
Mm-hmm. The underlying fact, though, is that healthcare is a growth industry. Fortunately, we're all living longer. That we have problems that develop, but they can be fixed. I mean, it's a miracle what's happened in our ability to help people live longer and fuller lives. And so anytime you're looking at an institution or an industry, what you want is the ability to grow. And so healthcare is a growth industry. It's fraught with problems. It's fraught with funding problems. Medicare, Medicaid is a big issue. Managed healthcare is a big issue. Prescription drugs is an issue. And so what you have to do is be very good at it. There is no way you can be a mediocre player today in the healthcare industry and survive. And so you have to have good people who run places very professionally, who are at the cutting edge of what's going on, and have an incredibly good medical staff. That's what we have at Rush.
Now, how does Rush fit into the local healthcare scene here in Chicago?
The Chicago healthcare scene is pretty fragmented. For most cities, it's compared to most cities, it's very fragmented. You have 5 academic medical centers in the metropolitan area. That's quite a few. Academic medical centers is where it all happens. It's where you educate new physicians. It's where you do research to help the future, and you apply that research in the hospital clinically. And that's what Rush is all about. Here we're blessed in Chicago to have a number of institutions, and we all have a piece of the pie, and we're all competing with each other in a way. And what we're proud of at Rush is our medical staff. We have just an unbelievably good medical staff and an extremely strong nursing structure. We are a magnet nursing hospital, which is recognition for an outstanding nursing program. The only full-service hospital in Chicago that has that designation.
What would you have to say about the importance of civic involvement for a corporate executive such as yourself? You have the talents, you have the business sense, you have the connections to do an awful lot of good just with picking up the phone and making a call or two.
You have to give back. I mean, it's incredibly important when you're privileged to do all the things that many of the CEOs have been able to do. You have to give back. And we have a remarkable business community in Chicago. Most of my associates, most of the people that I work with are friends. We know each other. We help each other, whether it's Millennium Park or whether it's Rush or whether it's the United Way. We work together, and we try to find in our schedule enough time to devote to that, and there's great satisfaction from that. Chicago's a vibrant community. I mean, we arguably are one of the best cities in the world in which to live. Our quality of life here is extraordinary, and a big piece of that quality of life is the result of the involvement of the business community.
I know that you can draw a lot of satisfaction from the various areas of your life and the involvement you've had. What gives you the biggest satisfaction as you look back on things where you are now?
Oh, my family. I have 6 children. I'm proud of every one of them. They're all doing good things. They're all good people. They live around the world. My oldest son lives in Hong Kong, for example. We were gypsies when we were moving around, and so I've had the opportunity to offer them the chance to see the other part of the world, and they've picked it up and run with it.
You've kind of hinted at maybe another retirement in the offing. What's next for you? I'm
not going to retire. I will do something. You know, I may not do as much as I'm doing now. I like to work. I have a full-time office. I'm blessed with an assistant who is extraordinary. She has been at my side helping me for 25 years, and Lou Frizz, and I worry though if she ever decides to retire, then I'm probably going to have to follow her because I depend on her so much.
So you expect to keep your hand in at something here?
I will. Yeah, as long as God willing, as long as I have good health and I have energy, and so far so good.
Thank you so much. I think that went very well.
Good.
Is there anything I didn't talk about?
No, I think that they're very well done.
Thank you.
I enjoyed very much going down to SIU and receiving the Lincoln Laureate Award, and there were 400 or 500 people there, and every one of them came through the line. Every one of them, I stood next to Jackie Joyner-Kersee, and who was a very popular choice, obviously, and is from that area, the East St. Louis area, and she is a charming person, and so the two of us met a lot of people.
You look at the people that, for example, this year who won the award, such a diverse group, and all the stuff that they do is just amazing.
It is amazing. Yeah. Just listening to the biographies as the presentations were made was exciting. It was exciting to be part of it, but it was to see, as you say, the diversity of what people have done, and all people that have their roots here in Illinois.
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating. It turns out that we can stop.